Welcome back to another kitchen video. This time I'm going to make some egg white bread, and I have all of my eggs ready and the things that I need to separate the whites from the yolks, and I also have a bowl for the eggshells. So that is just what I'm going to do now. I'm also going to make some egg milk, and that is why I have this little Tupperware box over there. So I'm putting in some of the yolks into that one, and the rest of them I will just use for the bread. And I'm also always using this extra bowl to separate the egg yolks and the whites, because if I have a mistake and I have a whole big bowl of egg whites and then one of the yolks or some shell gets down there, it's really nice to have it in a little bowl instead of destroying all of the egg whites. So that is why I'm doing it this way. And as you can see, sometimes a little shell comes down there and it's really easy to remove it from the little bowl. And I ended up using 18 eggs right now. That is for one recipe of my egg white bread. And this is how many milliliters there is of each thing. And that over there, that's the yolks that I'm going to use for my egg milk. But before I do that, I will use up the rest of the egg milk that I had from the other day, and I'm going to make kind of a milkshake. So I have this sweet drops, some electrolytes, xanthan gum, cacao powder, MCT oil powder, and some collagen. And this is the egg milk from the other day, so it's nice and cool. So I just put that in my blender and then the rest of the things and blend it up. And it's really tasty this way. It feels like I'm drinking a real milkshake, even though this is sugar-free and really low carb. And I have all those good oils and proteins in there. And I really like using my Vitamix for everything, because it's just such a great blender. Now I'm pouring the milkshake onto a big ice cube, and this is the way I'm going to drink it. And it's really nice to have a drink like this when I'm working in the kitchen. So that's why I'm making it right now, and that is kind of my breakfast meal. So now I'm going to enjoy this one while I'm still working in the kitchen. And later on in this video I will also show you how I make the egg milk. I also have a separate video where I make different types of egg milk and make them into really tasty creamers. So now I'm going to start with my egg white bread. And I have some golden flaxseed flour, some nutritional yeast, salt, gelatin, dry yeast, and some milk powder and some other stuff. And this is my egg white powder, and I have the fresh egg yolks already. Oh no, not the egg yolks, the egg whites I have already in my mixing bowl. And then I'm just putting all of the rest of the stuff in there, and I will put the ingredients down in the description so you can see them there. I'm always mixing my dry ingredients with the egg yolks before I'm starting the mixer, just so that they won't stick to the sides of the bowl. And then I'm just mixing it for maybe 5 to 10 minutes. When I feel that it is stiff enough, I will stop. And while it is mixing, I will mix the other ingredients that I'm going to use. And this is some whole egg powder that I'm only using a few tablespoons of. And I'm also using that flaxseed flour. That is to give it a little more structure and some fibers. But because there's fat in it, I will put it in at the end. And I'm also making my baking plate ready, and now the whites are stiff, so I can stop the mixer and mix in the other things. I will also put in those fresh egg yolks. It will give it a nice color, and it will make it more moist and not so dry as some egg white breads can be sometimes. And you could stir these extra things in by hand, but I'm just using my mixer this time. And then at the end I will also put in a spatula and just make sure that nothing has sunken to the bottom of the bowl and that everything is mixed in the right way. Else it will get stripy inside, so there will be white and yellow stripes if the egg yolks is not incorporated perfectly. And this first batter I will make into some buns. So I'm using this big ice cream scoop and just scooping them out into buns on this baking plate and then baking them like this. And the rest of it I will make into something else. And I will bake it about 30 minutes on 325 Fahrenheit or about 165 Celsius. And I'll just set my timer for maybe about 20 minutes and then I'll check on them. And now I'm going to put the rest of the batter into these burger bun shapes, and I'll just spray it with some fat and then put in all of the batter. And this makes it so that they will keep their shape a little better, because it's a little runny because of the egg yolks. So that is why it's really good sometimes to use a mold to put them in. And then I have a little rest here, and I'll just put that out onto the plate, and it will be much flatter, but it's still usable. And the buns look really good. They have grown into each other, but that is to expect. And the burger buns and the little flatter bread is also looking really good. And we're using these in a lot of different ways. Now I just mixed up the second batch, and this time I'm going to make a big loaf and then some kind of hot dog buns or something like that. These longer shapes. And that the mold there is about the same kind that I have my burger buns in, just that it's a longer shape. So they will also keep their shape this way instead of just be really flat. And because the batter was a little runny, and there's these little holes in the mold, I have to remove some of the excess that came out on the other side before I can get the buns out of the molds. Sometimes they're really easy and other times they are a little harder, but it depends on how the batter is, and this time it was a little more runny than it is other times. And then I'm reusing this mold and making some more buns with the rest of the batter. Now I'm beginning on my other recipe, and this is for a really delicious cake. So I'm just starting out the same way as if it were the egg white bread. So I'm separating the yolks from the whites. And I just took the rest of the bread out of the oven, and it also looks really nice. And the color comes from the egg yolks. So now I'm going to mix up the batter for my cake. So I'm also starting with the egg whites, and I'm going to mix them really well. And while that is mixing, I'm going to make the rest of the ingredients that is going in there. So this is some cream cheese, and I'm also using the yolks here. And then a tiny bit of almond flour, and there's really not much going into this cake. Most of the cake is just the eggs. I'm also using some husk, the psyllium husk. And some baking powder. And some erythritol. I found this recipe at a Danish website called Madbanditten, and I will link it in the description, but I'm just putting in a little more sweetener than the recipe calls for. And this was just some baking cacao powder. This is vanilla. And a little tiny pinch of salt just to enhance the flavors. This is also a little sweetener. As I said, I like it a little sweeter than the recipe calls for, so that's why I put in some extra of that. Now I'm going to mix the egg whites and then fold the rest of the ingredients in afterwards. Now the egg whites are really stiff, just like they're supposed to be. And then I have the rest of my ingredients all mixed together, and it would have been a little easier if I had them in a bigger bowl, because the right way to do it is to take some of the egg whites and put them into the mixture and mix it around, and then first you can go a little harder, and then afterwards you have to be really careful to not knock out all of the air from the egg whites, and that would have been easier in a bigger bowl, but I'm managing it. And I'm being really careful with it, and when it's all mixed together I'm pouring it out into my baking plate and flattening it really nicely so it's even all the way around, and then I will bake it in the oven. And my big loaf of egg white bread has just finished baking, so I'm pulling it out of the mold and removing the baking paper so that it can cool nicely, and it looks really good. And now the cake is also done. It doesn't need a lot of time in the oven, only about maybe 10 minutes or so. But now I'm going to have a little taste of the egg white bread. This is some of the buns, and I actually like that they are a little flatter than some breads because it's easier to make sandwiches. And in this ones I'm going to put in some mayo and a little mustard and some chicken lunch slices. And I also have some fresh cucumbers from my garden, so I'm also going to put in some slices of those. And they turned out really good, and they were really tasty. So that's nice to just have a little easy lunch while I'm in the kitchen. And now that the cake has cooled for a few minutes, I will remove the baking paper. But sometimes it feels a little soft, so you are afraid to just remove it. So I'm going to do it this other way, where I'll put some extra baking paper on top, and then a baking plate or cooling rack on each side, and then just swap it around. And then it's really easy to get off the baking paper without tearing the cake apart, because it's a little soft, this cake. Of course, there's no gluten in it, so it's only the eggs and the psyllium husk that will keep it together. But it was actually more firm than I had thought it would be. So this is just a little tip on how to remove some baking paper an easy way. And now I'm going to make the filling for the cake, and I have some heavy whipping cream that I will whip up, and then I'll also put in some cream cheese and some erythritol. This is powdered erythritol that I just powdered in my Vitamix, so that's easier and cheaper. And this is some vanilla again, and some sweet drops. The recipe also don't call for the sweet drops, but as I said before, I like it a little sweeter. So I'm just mixing this up so the whipping cream will get whipped, and then I'm putting in the cream cheese. I also used some more cream cheese than the recipe called for, just because I had it opened and I thought that it couldn't hurt anyone to get a little more cream cheese into the recipe. So this is the whipping cream, and I just put in the cream cheese and mixed it all around. And then now I'm putting it onto the cake, and I will flatten it out so that it will be nice and even all the way around, but I will just leave a little line at the end, because now I will roll it. It's kind of a Swiss roll, and if you put too much filling on the end, it will just ooze out. So that is why I'm doing it this way, and I'm using the baking paper just to lift it up and make it really tight and nice without pushing it too hard. And the filling is fortunately really firm, not too runny, so that makes it a little easier. And now that I have it all the way to the end, you can see that if there would have been any more filling, it would have come out there. So I'm just trying to lay it the best way so it won't open again, and because it's a little thick there, so it's just so that it lays flat down. And now it's going into the fridge so it can cool a little, and of course I have to cut a piece of it once it's cooled just to see how it looks on the inside, and it's really good. You wouldn't think that this one was keto, because it just tastes so good, and the cake is soft and sweet and delicious, and the filling is nice and soft, and yeah, it's just perfect this way. And while I'm at it, I will also make some lunch for my husband for the next day so he can bring at work. So I'm using that flatter bread that I made, and if instead of cutting it open, I will just make a sandwich like that. And then some of the burger buns, I'm just cutting open a little and putting on some cream cheese and some cheese and ham. And then for dinner we had some chicken soup with fresh tomatoes and some of the freshly baked egg white bread. And as you can see, it's really soft and delicious, and it's nice to dip in the soup and eat it this way. So that's really good to have again. And now I'm going to show you how to make that egg milk that I talked about. So I'm just putting the egg yolks in my Vitamix and starting it on low, and then I'm pouring in some boiling hot water from the top. So it will kind of cook the egg yolks, but it won't scramble them, and it will just be like an egg milk. So it's turning out to be like a milk with a little yellow color because of the yolks. And then afterwards I'll put in some other things. And you can just leave it like this and use it that way, or do as I do. And I'm putting in some xanthan gum just to make sure that it won't separate and it will make it a little thicker. And then I'm putting in some butter, and this is a really salty butter, so I'm not putting in extra salt, else I would have. And then I'm just blending these two things up again. And this makes it a really low carb creamer or milk. And if you wanted to, you could put in some other flavors, or you could put in sweeteners, and I'm usually doing that. Now I'm making my coffee, so this is from Beanies, and that is coffee with flavor. This one is caramel, and of course I'm using some MCT oil powder and some collagen. And then I'm pouring in my hot water and just giving this a mix before I put in the egg milk. And then I will put in my freshly made egg milk, and as you can see, it's really foamy and delicious. So it's just like if you were going to make a normal latte or cappuccino or something like that. And here you can really see how it's foamy on top. And if you put it in the fridge afterwards, it will foam down some. But when you're going to make it again, you can give it a whisk and it will foam up just like a normal milk will. And you can drink it cold and hot, as I also showed you before. The rest of the egg milk I will put into a glass bottle that is really clean, and I will let it cool a little on the countertop before I will put it in the fridge, because it's boiling hot right now. So just to make sure that the glass won't break, I'm just doing it this way. And this is just how nice and yellow it looks now. And as you can see, it looks really similar to normal milk, even though it's water, egg yolks and butter most of all. And this is the next day, so I'm going to have an iced coffee this time. I'm just using the same coffee beans or Nescafe or whatever you want to call it. I'm also putting in some brown erythritol this time. I like that taste in my iced coffees. And of course I'm using the MCT oil powder and the collagen powder once again. And even though it's an iced coffee, I will pour on some hot water and mix it around just to get everything incorporated. But I'm not using a lot of hot water this time. And then I'm putting a big ice cube in my cup, and then I will pour on the hot liquid just on top of the ice cube, so it will melt it a little but still cool the coffee, and then I can put on my egg milk on top of that. So now the egg milk has cooled because it's the next day, and you can see just how creamy it is. It's almost just like heavy whipping cream, even though it's not as fatty as that. So this is how it looks when it's finished, and it's just like a real iced coffee with sugar and high on carbs and so on. But this is all for this time, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Please subscribe and follow on Instagram at Vestas Farm Life. Have a good day. Bye.